Doesn't really matter how long it's been since you last saw your loved one, there is still always a chance that they could be found. People go missing every year, but fortunately, many of them are found. Don't give up hope that your missing person will return to you safe and sound. Keep your loved one in your heart and pray for their return. New York City in the 1970s and 80s was out of control, and if you happen to have lived or grew up in a minority neighborhood, it was 10 times worse. Open drug markets, prostitution, abandoned, burnt-out buildings, and police corruption was the norm. When a new mayor took office in January of 1978, he promised to turn the city around. Maybe some change took place in certain areas of the city, but like always, the hood got it worse. Mayor Edward Irving Koch, a native New Yorker, and as he would always proclaim, that he was just a
Jewish kid from the Bronx,
knew firsthand the conditions of that borough. At the time, it was probably the worst borough in the city.
Comparing New York City today with what it was last year, crime is appreciably down. But nevertheless, it still exists and exists in a way that gets people upset.
Crime and police corruption was so bad in the city that a volunteer crime prevention organization was formed called the Guardian Angels that Mayor Koch publicly opposed. Even though the Guardian Angels were unarmed, you would always hear about them getting stabbed and shot.
Last night, eyewitnesses say hundreds of kids were holding a jam session, playing music and, as they say, hanging out, when 8 Guardian Angels appeared. The Angels say they were looking for a missing 16-year-old mother and her 2-year-old child. But before they could pass the playground, a number of youngsters confronted them on the street, one of them pulling out a .38 caliber special and began shooting, hitting 16-year-old Juan Olivio in the head and hip, and hitting 19-year-old Frank Sanchez in the chest.
Still, despite all that, they continued to patrol the subways in crime-infested neighborhoods.
Curtis Sleewer, founder of the Angels, indicated that now that his group has expanded from the subways to some of the roughest neighborhoods in New York City, the risks out there are greater.
That's where all the hard rocks are, and that's where all the guns are. And obviously, when you start going into neighborhood turf, that's where you're going to run into problems such as this. Add to it the fact that the 10 guys on the corner were dusted up, smoking angel dust, and you can't even talk to people like that. I think the people in the area would not have done that. But one crazed, demented person started a near riot there as the 500 stampeded, 2 angels were shot, and quite frankly, it's something that you see every day in this town.
With all of that going on, a segment of the population was falling through the cracks. People were literally disappearing off the streets. There weren't a lot of resources put in place to find these people, and if you were a minority, you were out of luck. I remember bodies being found in some of the many abandoned buildings at that time going unidentified. There are relatives of people who went missing over 30 years ago still looking for them, still looking for closure. On September 18, 1983, at approximately 12 o'clock in the afternoon, 11-year-old Kirk Quintons headed out to the Top Tomato supermarket located at 831 Rosedale Avenue in the Bronx to buy his mom a can of soda. His family hasn't seen him since. The store was only a couple of blocks from his home, and according to his mother, Lila Quintons, Kirk often swept the floors and packed boxes there to make a little money, so she wasn't alarmed when he didn't return home right away. Witnesses stated that they last saw him picking up bottles in the vacant lot near the store. He was wearing some Levi blue jeans and a pair of blue and white sneakers. When he failed to come home that evening, his relatives started looking for him. When they couldn't find him, they called the police. Investigating officer Robert Crooks of the Missing Persons Bureau stated that there didn't seem to be any issues going on in the home that would make Kirk not want to return. Usually that's the first thing the police think. If a child comes up missing, that they ran away, or if it's an adult that they left on their own and don't want to be found. About a month later, there were reports of a sighting of Kirk on Rosedale and Soundview Avenues, but it turned out to be Kirk's twin brother Keith. If anyone knows the whereabouts of Kirk Quintons, who would be 51 years old now, please call 1-800-THE-LOST. That's 1-800-843-5678. Or the New York City Police Department's Missing Persons Unit at 212-694-7781. Somebody has to know something. Please put away all those no-snitching street codes and help us find answers to what happened to Kirk. Let's finally bring this case to a close.